Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar on 7 ways AP automation can improve your workday with AvidXchange. We have Rhonda and Jack here today presenting, so I will hand things over to you, Rhonda and Jack.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. I'm Rhonda Greene, Principal Solutions Consultant here at AvidXchange, and I'm with my colleague, Jack Clarke, who is a Senior Solutions Consultant. So we're excited to talk to you today about some trends that we're seeing in AP. So today we're going to talk about trends in 2022, 7 ways automation can improve your workday, AP automation with AvidXchange. So we talk to lots of folks here at AvidXchange, and we hear repeatedly that some of the main pain points for B2B payment management is definitely the fraud risk. It continues to be a big threat, really in multiple different payment modalities. The lack of visibility that folks have into their invoice and payment information. A lot of the AP processes, especially in a manual AP world, are inaccurate and prone to error. And also those same processes are very manual and cumbersome. Accenture's Future of Work study revealed that 83% of those surveyed believe a hybrid work model would be ideal, with hybrid being defined as working from home anywhere from 25 to 75% of the time. Something most AP departments discovered in the past year is that paper processing was no longer viable. Going to the office to retrieve invoices from the mail or having to print out checks when we were going through the pandemic was not an option for many. So that's really what was the catalyst. People started looking more toward automation. The IOFM 2021 benchmarking data showed that 1 in 5 AP departments expect to lose a significant share of their team members to retirement. But the good news is allowing remote workers opens the door to a wider labor pool. And AP is one of those departments that you historically haven't thought about, is working from home, because usually they're working with, PCs and they need to have access to the file cabinets and all of that. So with the pandemic, it really caused a lot of people to, scramble, but really, especially now that we're, in this kind of great resignation phase in our country, companies are finding that they have to be more flexible. They've got to allow that flexibility in order to get the talent to come in the door. But that raises the question of what's the best way to manage and train a team, a remote team, and keep them engaged. Also, they have to consider security concerns around the different devices. So really from 2022 to 2026, it's predicted that 1 in 5 AP organizations expect to lose a lot of their members. So again, AP automation is the way to go. It's scalable, and again, it's taking away all of those manual cumbersome tasks. So let's talk about 7 ways automation can improve your workday. So some common hesitations to AP automation that we hear over and over again is, things like, well, why fix it? It's not broken. Our current process works just fine. We also hear, well, there's no budget. We don't have budget for AP automation. We consider that more of a luxury than a need. Also, we hear not enough volume. We don't feel like our, 50 or 100 invoices qualifies for AP automation. We think the ROI would be low, if any at all. And also, who has time to learn and implement a new solution? So these are things that we hear day in and day out. So let's talk about all of the benefits. So number 1, of course, saving time and money. So according to Goldman Sachs, AP automation can drive 70 to 80% time savings for AP staff. And this is absolutely true. Having been a long-time former AP manager myself, automation really changes the game. It's so much more efficient. You're taking away those repetitive, time-consuming tasks, and you're really giving your team more time to do more quality type related work. They're able now to maybe do account reconciliations or other things like that. So the American Productivity and Quality Center found top performers, which they consider to be the top 25% of businesses evaluated, spent an average of $2.07 per invoice. But the lowest 25% spent nearly 5 times as much, or $10 per invoice. And again, that's including all of the things that you're seeing on the screen. You're opening and sorting invoices, your data entry, waiting for those approvals, and typically maybe interoffice mail or maybe through email, also having to copy and scan, and then of course fielding those vendor calls. Also, an increase in visibility. A centralized hub makes it so much easier to keep track of your invoices. With automation, when your invoices come in, which balances are outstanding, when the payments are due, and who hasn't approved invoices or payments. And Jack's going to show you how you'll have that visibility and you'll know exactly where your invoices are every step of the way. E-invoicing is the first step in a paperless AP automation process, and it stores all invoices in a centralized cloud-based hub, regardless of how they're received. Invisibility is key. AvidXchange's invoice and pay solutions provide visibility into your AP process by digitizing those invoices and payments. So it's so much easier for you and your team to search for and retrieve invoice and payment information. Also, number 3 is a big one, eliminating paper. Like I said, I remember, back in the days where we had, row after row of filing cabinets, and we even had to pay for off-site storage because of, IRS requirements to keep the information. And just having paper everywhere, incredibly inefficient. Things get lost. You have to request duplicates from vendors if you're, actually taking invoices to folks to approve. So reports show that 70% of B2B volume is still paid with paper checks. So when you're assessing how much you can save with automation, factor in the cost also of those physical supplies. So not only all of the time your team is spending, on the payment process. I've heard from folks that check runs can take them all day to process. But also consider things like the check themselves, envelopes, stamps, all of that. According to Goldman Sachs, supplies alone cost at least $1.55 a check. And also expediting approvals. That's always something that we hear a lot of, because it's important to be able to get those invoices in so that you have visibility, get them approved so they're paid in a timely fashion. And automating your current approval process and workflows will greatly help you with that. Custom automation workflows can eliminate the need to reach out to an approver every month about the same dollar amount threshold. Also reroute approvals when someone's out of office. You can also gently remind approvers to approve invoices and payments. Again, you're going to have visibility. You're going to know exactly where your invoices are in the approval workflow. And also it provides a central repository for anytime, anywhere access to invoice information. And this is a big one, stopping scammers. According to the Association for Financial Professionals, checks are the most susceptible to payments fraud, and I definitely know this to be the case. I remember back before Positive Pay having to, what seemed like at least 4 or 5 checks a month were being stolen, the ink being washed, the payee or dollar amount information being changed, and of course, the fraudsters taking it to the bank to cash those checks. So then AP has to work to get the correct vendor paid, work with the bank to recover their funds. So much work goes into it. But at least with Positive Pay, it has greatly reduced check fraud. However, it is still extremely prevalent. And for companies today that don't use Positive Pay, I don't think that I could recommend it anymore. It is so important and critical for those paper checks. But of course, you also have to worry about fraud for the different payment methods as well. According to the Association for Financial Professionals 2021 Payments Fraud Report, nearly 75% of organizations were targets of payment fraud attack in 2020, 75%. In 2020, checks and wire transfers continued to be the payment methods most impacted by fraud at 66% and 39% respectively. I have, recently done different best practice presentations and tracks for AP professionals talking about fraud and the ways to be proactive to prevent it as much as you can. And just hearing the feedback from everyone who participated, I think there was 98% of people in that room that had been impacted. And a lot of it now, of course, is through phishing schemes and, through ACH fraud or attempted fraud. So it's incredibly important that you stay diligent. And so some of the things that our automated fraud monitoring system helps with is identifying a source as a trusted vendor, providing conditional approval rules, identifying duplicate and similar invoices, configuring those unique workflows, and issuing immediate notification alerts, and again, identifying fraudulent invoices. So again, it's so much better to be proactive than reactive. Also, I don't think a lot of people think about this, but really when you're thinking about your payments, really an increase in e-payment adoption is critical because, we've talked a lot about how checks are so prone to fraud. So it's more important than ever to move your payments off those paper checks and into an e-payment solution. So suppliers can actually submit their invoices and receive their payments through our network. And we actually have dedicated supplier services teams that do things like verify and update their information, confirm their accepted payment types, which we have the virtual card, AvidPay Direct, and the paper check. Jack will go into more on that. Also, we perform due diligence on outstanding payments to make sure they're getting resolved quickly. And this network of suppliers really creates opportunities for incentives and discounts and maximizes your potential to lower your payment processing costs by paying vendors in the most efficient way. And finally, streamlining month-end and year-end closing. I know we all love to do that. We look forward to it, but I can definitely say again from experience that automated systems allow you to close your books, to reconcile your invoices, do all of those things so much more efficiently, so much quicker. And when it comes to month-end closing and year-end, automation can provide just some of the following. So we're talking about time savings, and again, having that visibility into your approvals, improved controls with approval documentation, having access to that historical data and improved analysis, regular approvals, no fire drills at month end. I know we've all been there. Missing invoice identification, and our accrual reporting is really top notch. You'll be able to know which invoices that have been received that have not gone through the system that you need to accrue for. So we've got really robust reporting that can help you with that. So now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Jack Clarke, who's going to talk to you about AP automation with AvidXchange.
All right. Well, thank you, Rhonda, for kind of going over some of the key challenges and key things to think about in the AP world. And really what I'm going to talk about is really the specifics of how AvidXchange really helps address these key areas that we just kind of elaborated on. So what we typically find when we talk to accounts payable teams or finance teams is that there's a lot of consistency in how people are doing their AP process today, whether they're in a very manual process where it's paper-based, or if they're in a process where they may have some portion of the life cycle of AP electronic. Really, we find that there's anywhere from 12 to 15 steps in the process from the time an invoice comes through the front door to the time that payment has been processed and reconciled. And depending on your level of approval and your scrutiny and whether you have a PO process, that can extend that to be even more steps and touch points. So if you think about every person that has to take a look at that invoice, has to provide input on how that invoice is coded, has to have a touch point or has to rekey the information, there's a lot of people that are involved in AP, from getting that invoice to the appropriate approvers all the way through getting the right levels of authority signing off, and then getting the payment authorized and processed. So what we do at AvidXchange is really use a combination of technology and services to reduce that process down to the 3 key steps that you still want to be able to control while automating all of the rest of the process for you. So you're still going to have full control over how you code invoices. You can set up smart coding rules that are going to help to drive automated coding. You can give visibility to the appropriate approvers in the process and give them access to code directly and have that coding feed into the accounting system so that someone in accounting doesn't have to redo all of that work, say if someone's writing the code on the invoice. Also, the approval process is going to be automated. So instead of someone in accounts payable having to look at every invoice and determine where this needs to go for approval, and then who that person is that needs to sign off, and then perhaps that person needs to determine who their manager is and which invoices their manager needs to see and which ones they don't, that's all going to be automated and defined with a predefined process that also offers you the flexibility to address some of those exceptions where maybe there's a person that needs to confirm that a service was actually completed before you approve the invoice who might not be part of that typical approval lifecycle. And then the accounting team maintains control over what invoices are posted to the GL and when. So being able to control the timing of posting really helps to accelerate your month-end close. It allows you to differentiate which invoices are posting in the current month, which invoices are posting in the next month that you're opening, and really giving you that visibility, as Rhonda mentioned, to all of those potential accruals that need to be booked and being able to address those proactively. So the last day of month-end close isn't a scramble to figure out what we need to account for. So really, we have 2 sides to the process. And if you think about accounts payable automation, a lot of times when people are thinking about AP automation, they really focus on the invoice process because that's where a lot of the pain and time is spent, is getting an invoice from point A to point Z. What we really focus on is both sides of the equation, because every invoice that you are processing has to be paid somehow. So if you think about AP as kind of an entire life cycle, it really includes both sides of the coin. So when we talk about the Avid StrongRoom platform, what we're really going to do is receive invoices and eliminate all of the data entry to get you down to that 3-step process. So the first thing we're going to do is be able to digitize the invoices. And we have several different mechanisms to receive those invoices and create an electronic version of the invoice for you so that you don't ever have to touch the paper. So the majority of customers and people that we talk to have already got a good percentage of their invoices coming in via email. A lot of suppliers want to send invoices via email. It saves them on processing costs and having to print and mail all those invoices as well. But there's still that percentage of invoices that are coming in through the mail, maybe from some of your smaller, more traditional vendors who are used to processing paper and haven't really adopted the technology that's out there yet. So we'll be able to address really both types of inbound invoices. And then you might have invoices where you need to actually go out to a vendor's website and download the invoice. So we've provided you with 3 mechanisms to receive and for us to capture the invoices. We can set up an email inbox that's dedicated to your organization where suppliers can send those invoices in, and we're going to capture all of the header level detail and then analyze that invoice to determine what business rules need to be applied to route that to the right approver. We can receive invoices through a PO box as well. So if you have a lot of time spent scanning invoices and you've got accounting people that are opening mail and scanning, and touching the paper, we can take that off of your plate and have those invoices sent directly to a PO box where AvidXchange will actually open the mail, scan the invoices, and digitize those on your behalf. And then you have the ability to upload invoices right into the process as well. So you can really eliminate all of the data entry that typically occurs. And that might happen to occur at multiple steps in the process. You might have data entry when you send an email off to an approver with information about the invoice, and they have to provide a response with coding or approvals, and you need to capture and document that somewhere. And then the accounting team has to enter that information into the accounting system and post the invoice. So we'll really eliminate all of that redundant rekeying by having invoices coming into a centralized process. So when you think about how those invoices are arriving, once that invoice comes into one of those three mechanisms, we're going to extract the data, and we use a combination of technology and services to do that. So we've developed some really innovative technology that's going to help to streamline the capture of the invoices, but also has human oversight to eliminate exceptions and really make sure that any information that is tied to your particular business rules that are going to define where that approval and coding needs to occur are going to be pre-populated on the invoice. And then we'll work with you as you get set up in the system to determine what your approval lifecycle is going to entail. What type of information is going to drive this invoice to the appropriate approver? Is there maybe a certain category of vendor like IT, where we're going to send invoices to the IT group based on who the vendor is, but there might be other factors, whether there's certain vendors that maybe send in invoices and there's a particular manager at a location or in a department that's tied to that approval. So you can build in your internal hierarchy so that all of the appropriate levels of approval are met and an audit trail is captured before those invoices get posted. The accounting team, instead of having to play traffic cop, can now move to really being the kind of final quality control to make sure that all of the approvals have been obtained, all the coding's accurate, and that those invoices are getting posted in the right period. So you can really take the burden off of accounts payable to have to track down invoices and get them into the right people's hands. They can be more of kind of the final checkpoint to ensure that the accounting's accurate. Once those invoices get posted, those invoices now need to be paid. And what we're going to do from the payment side of the process is really help offload a lot of that manual work that you go through today. So if you're selecting, the group of payments that are due this week, and maybe you're paying in multiple different methods. So you could be paying a large portion of those by check, and you've got to print checks. You've got to get those checks signed. You've got to bundle all of the information that you send to the vendor in an envelope and pay for the postage to mail those checks out. You might have payments that you're going to issue through an ACH, and you're going to have a notcha file that you've got to separate out and send off to your bank to process. And then maybe you have payments that are going on your corporate card, and you need to account for those separately. So you might have 3 different processes, or even more if you're processing, say, wire transfers, to reconcile and process payments. What AvidXchange is going to do through the AvidPay network is allow you to send the single batch of payments for each checkbook through an approval process. And once you sign off on that approval, capturing that audit trail and really eliminating your manual check signing process, we'll then reference our network to determine what method of payment those suppliers are receiving. So we've onboarded over 825,000 suppliers over the last decade. And what that means is that we know how those suppliers receive payment. We've built a profile for each supplier. So we know what the method of payment is, but also what the mechanics of delivering the payment are, what the conditions that we might need to meet in order to deliver an electronic payment versus a check, and what level of remittance advice that supplier needs in order to be able to reconcile on their end. So what we're really doing is taking all of that back and forth communication that typically occurs between your accounting staff and your suppliers when it comes time to issue payment, and we're helping to offload that work by having this information available. What we're typically finding is when we cross-reference your supplier list against our existing network, there's somewhere in the 30 to 40% of those suppliers that we already know how to pay off of the bat. So if you're processing almost 100% of checks today, we can take a lot of that activity and convert that to electronic payment. But we take it a step further. And this is something that if you've looked at, different payment options with your bank, or maybe you're out in the market looking at different AP solutions, this is one of the things that makes AvidXchange unique, is that we'll proactively reach out to the suppliers. So when we do that cross-reference between your supplier base in each check run against our network, we'll identify those suppliers that aren't part of the network yet. And we have what we call a just-in-time enrollment process, where we'll reach out to the supplier and we'll let them know that we have a check that we're ready to send to you on behalf of XYZ customer for invoice number ABC for the specific amount. So they know that we're paying them a legitimate payment that's due to them. We're also going to use the vendor master from your accounting system to verify the address that we need to send that check to. So when we get the supplier on the phone, we're going to confirm the address that the check needs to be mailed to. And then we'll find out if they prefer to take that payment electronically and go through what the options are for them to be set up to receive a direct deposit. Or in a lot of cases where the supplier has a merchant account, we can process that as a virtual card payment and provide the enhanced remittance in an electronic format. So that really eliminates the back and forth communication when a payment gets received, where that supplier needs to contact your accounting staff to know what that payment's for. So once we onboard a supplier to the network, all of our customers can process payments through that supplier's particular method of payment. And that's where that network effect really comes into play and increases the percentage over time of payments that are processed electronically. And your team isn't going to have to chase down suppliers to get their banking information, to store that information, or to have to understand all the mechanics of how they deliver those payments. So that's a lot of work that we take off of the plate just by utilizing our payment network. And then when you think about your accounting system and how that information feeds into the accounting system, we're leveraging API integrations to automate the sync of data. When invoices are approved, we're posting batches into the accounting system, so you don't have to retouch that invoice again once it hits your AP ledger. We're also going to have the ability to post the cleared payment data into the accounting system and have that payment automatically applied to that invoice and close out the invoice process. So if you think about all of those individual touch points that you may go through today, we're basically eliminating that by automating the process and really giving you back all of that time in order to focus on more strategic or productive activities, whether it be accelerating your month-end close, providing more advanced reporting, and then also having the ability to really have a central repository for all the information you need for an audit. So if you think about all of that day-to-day activity, we're also going to be syncing the vendor master and the chart of accounts and purchase order data from the accounting system. So you're going to have the ability for all of that information that typically someone needs to look at inside of the ERP to be available in the system to auto-populate on the invoice and then allow you to make the proper adjustments as part of your approval process. So when we receive the invoices, we're going to capture those invoices and we digitize the invoice and store that in the cloud and make that available to you in the online portal. So you'll have visibility to the invoices from the second they come into that inbox, or the second that invoice gets scanned, all the way through the history. So one-stop shopping for all of the kind of audit controls around AP and being able to see what the life cycle of that invoice was and what internal approvals were obtained in order to get that approved. So the workflow is going to capture the audit trail and also provide you with different ways to extend visibility to the people that might not have access to the accounting system today. If you think about an email-based approval process, if you're sending out invoices to approvers, they go into the black hole of email until it comes back and you have visibility to maybe how that bill is being coded. Whereas when we provide you with that centralized visibility, the accounting staff is going to be able to track that invoice in real time and know exactly where it is, who's been sitting on it for a period of time, be able to set alerts and notifications so that someone doesn't have to be nagging the approver. The system is going to be nagging the approver and making sure that they're doing what they need to do, or alerting the accounting staff or their supervisor that they need to go in and take action. So you eliminate all of that kind of chasing down of AP activity by giving visibility to the right people at the right time so that they can take action quickly and efficiently and get that invoice turned around. When it comes time to initiate the payment process, you're eliminating having to have a packet of information, which is going to eliminate the bundling of, say, the paper copy of the invoice, the email that was used to approve the invoice, any other additional documentation related to that vendor, and then the check that might be paper clipped on top for your CFO or your treasurer to sign. We're giving all that information that's already been captured through the natural life cycle of AP to that check signer so they can authorize payment and have all of that information available electronically and from any mobile device. So they don't have to be physically sitting in the office signing checks. During the pandemic, we heard a lot of stories about how people were really trying to manage this process. And some of the stories we had were people drawing straws to see who was taking the check printer home this weekend to go and print all the checks. And then people were having to drive across town to the CFO's house and deliver them a big envelope or a box of paper for them to go through and sign. There were other scenarios where people actually went to the CFO's house and sat there with them and had pizza and a drink while the CFO sat by the fire and signed, 1,000 checks on a Friday night. We heard kind of all the horror stories of the mechanics of utilizing paper to make payments. And what we found was that from the supplier's perspective, they were running into the same challenges. If you think about how you receive payments or how your suppliers are receiving payments, if they were primarily receiving checks, they probably have a PO box where the checks get mailed to. Someone would have to physically go to the PO box, which now may have been closed. So there's payments that are sitting out there in La La Land that are waiting for some action to be taken in order to actually deposit those funds. And the accounting staff can't get to the PO box. They can't get to the bank to actually physically make the deposits, and they can't get back to the office to do the reconciliation. So people had to change their mindsets and really think about how to do that electronically. So we provided them with tools, both on the front end of the process where you're authorizing and approving and processing payments, but also on the back end of the process for the suppliers to allow them to receive that information electronically and not have to go through all of those various pain points. So when we have conversations with suppliers, our first payment option, if we don't get in touch with them, is to send a check. We're not going to hold up a payment. We're going to issue that check so the supplier gets paid efficiently, but we're going to follow up the next time an approved payment comes through to find out if they can take that payment electronically, because we know what kind of the pitfalls of being stuck in the paper world are, especially after the last few years. So this is really one of the things that we see trending from both sides of the equation, is people receiving and taking payments electronically and receiving all of that detail in an electronic way proactively. What we've also done is built technology that allows us to process payments in a straight through processing manner. So we can feed remittance detail directly into the accounting system or directly into an AR system for those suppliers that have that type of technology. And that's just an area that continues to grow and grow. So more and more suppliers are being able to receive those payments and those details through an integrated process. And then integration with the accounting system becomes key. There's a lot of different ways that you can manage accounts payable out there in the marketplace. One of the things that we hear a lot of times when people say that they have automated AP, what they really have is a document management system. They have a place to store invoices. They have a place where they can route invoices, but all of that accounting detail still needs to get into the accounting system somehow. So oftentimes there's customized integrations that get built, or there's files that need to be imported and exported, or even in some cases, that information is still getting physically rekeyed. So we build APIs that are integrating directly with your AP process and following the business logic in your accounting system. So you don't have to worry about what the resulting accounts payable journal entries are, because we're actually following the accounting system's business rules and processes in the same fashion as if you were keying that information. We're just feeding that in electronically. And then we're also keeping up-to-date information in front of your accounting staff and your approvers. So as you onboard new vendors, you're still setting those up in the accounting system, following best practices to ensure that you go through your internal controls around vendor onboarding. And then we import that vendor information to apply to the invoices. Same thing with your chart of accounts. As you're expanding, if you're opening new locations, or you've got different types of services or programs that you're offering, and you're continuing to add to your chart of accounts, we're keeping that information in sync so that the appropriate approvers have visibility to the right coding that they can apply and have that feed into the accounting system. One of the biggest challenges that we often find when people try to customize an AP system is getting a valid AP transaction to post into the accounting system. So we're following the business logic within your AP system and your accounting system's controls in order to facilitate that posting. So if you think about having, a secure environment with kind of the kind of scammer section that Rhonda was referring to earlier, and all the different ways that fraud can occur, you're going to now have all of the types of control points and checkpoints in place to eliminate the potential for fraud. So having the internal controls around approvals, making sure that any vendors that you're paying are going through your proper onboarding process. We'll actually go through that process when we go to facilitate payment by going through FAQS screening and ensuring that the suppliers are who they say they are and that the bank accounts belong to those suppliers. We're also going to give you the types of internal controls so that if you have invoices that may not be getting approved at the right levels, or you want to implement more visibility and control, you can extend that to the people that need to sign off. And then making sure your employees have secure access. So as more and more organizations are implementing things like multi-factor authentication or single sign-on, they have proper mechanisms to accurately and efficiently log in a secure manner to see all the detail they need to. A lot of times we'll hear that, we would just want the approvers to approve via email. Well, if you've seen any of the phishing scams that are out there and some of the emails that you get, they can make an email look very legit. And people that aren't paying attention click on those emails, and all of a sudden, all different types of viruses or malware and things can occur. So this is one of the areas that, as more and more people are moving into the digital world, we have to have the type of security and control points around to eliminate that type of fraudulent activity. Because check fraud is one thing, but once someone gets into your internal systems, that becomes a whole nother ballgame. So we're going to talk about AvidPay now in a little more detail. And when we talk about the AvidPay network, as I mentioned earlier, we've onboarded over 825,000 suppliers. What that means is when people, talk about, paying their suppliers the way that they've always paid them, that just may be the way that you've always paid the supplier. That might not be the way that supplier necessarily wants to receive payment. So we know how they want to receive payment, and that's where we go through and do that validation to ensure that they're getting the payments the way that they want to, in the methods they want to, the right people are getting the remittance advice, and that any type of technology that becomes available, they can take advantage of. So we're continuing to enhance how we deliver payments, what types of payment methods we offer. And by giving folks the ability to receive an enhanced direct deposit, they can have all that remittance advice sitting in an email, or they can have access to an online portal where they can view all of that detail. So it eliminates the back and forth communication or the phone calls that you might get saying, hey, where's my payment? And you telling them after you go and stop what you're doing and look it up, the check's in the mail. They're going to know when that payment's coming, what method of payment it is, and have visibility. And they're going to get proactive emails about those payments so that they don't have to, go through that back and forth communication that might occur today. You're also going to be able to extend that payment activity and status updates to the folks that don't have access to the accounting system. So if you have a, manager at a location that's contacting a supplier to, schedule a service, and everyone has those suppliers that before they want to do any other work, they want to know they're getting paid for whatever the last work they did was. So instead of that supplier asking you, what's the status of my payment, and you having to interrupt the accounting team, we're actually providing that visibility to the approver that signed off on that invoice the first time around, so they can see that, yes, a payment went out and that payment's being delivered, and here's the actual transaction details, so that they don't have to have those awkward conversations or stop what they're doing and contact accounting and interrupt their day. So you think about all of those various different types of payments, and then there's payments for things like utilities that are critically important to business continuity. If you don't have power in your building, you can't really operate in this digital world. So time-sensitive payments like utilities get prioritized, and we ensure that those payments get to the supplier with the right level of detail, so that you don't have any type of shutoffs or late payments or additional fees that need to be incurred. So these are the things that having a electronic payment network are really going to help enhance for the majority of your suppliers, and over time that's only going to be continuing to increase. So we talked about how the funding of payments kind of starts, but one of the things that we do that's unique is instead of having a lump sum of a batch of payments coming out of your account and basically having no visibility to what's happening with those funds until the payment clears, what we're actually doing is utilizing a unique identifier like the check number from your accounting system. As we debit your account to fund each of these types of payments, we're referencing that specific payment number. So you'll have a one-to-one reconciliation process that makes it easy for you to see which payments have cleared and which payments haven't by simply running a report and comparing that to your bank statement. versus having to take this lump sum and then go through all the manual calculations to see which payments have cleared and what that gap is, and then which of those payments are in that kind of missing bucket. And then all of the proof of payment information is going to come back to you and be in your hands in an electronic format. So if you think about checks that clear today and you get the image of the check from your bank, we're pushing that right into the history of the invoice. So anytime you need to reference that, it's there, it's available from an audit standpoint, it's centrally located and associated with all the internal controls and approvals that got to the point where that payment was issued. So all of that electronic cleared payment information and the audit trail of that process are all going to be captured and documented in the life cycle of the invoice. So these are kind of things that a lot of organizations think about maybe partially, but we've done this for a number of years and really thought about what the entire process needs to look like and what the mechanics and pieces are that are going to make AP's life easier. We'll talk about kind of what happens after automating. So if you think about the kind of goals that you may have internally when you think about automation, really we see a lot of people come to an organization, and this happens a lot when, especially with the younger generation, where maybe someone moves from a Fortune 500 company and becomes a director of finance in a mid-market company, and they say, well, we had all of these processes automated, up there. Why aren't we doing that here? They want to streamline the approval process so that they can approve invoices on their phone. People are on the go, people work remote, they want to have access to information and not have to physically be in the same place where the paper is. So having a digital centralized location for all the invoices is only going to help speed up the retrieval of information or the research that someone needs to do. A department head might need to negotiate a new contract with a vendor, and within a few clicks, they can have visibility to what the total spend was for that vendor over a period of time so that they can negotiate without having to rely on the accounting team to go compile all that data. It's also going to give you the visibility to the activity so that, again, the accounting team doesn't have to be the bottleneck of providing that information. You can provide role-based visibility to whoever needs it. And then the accuracy of reporting. When you think about how you report out of the accounting system, a lot of that reporting in the AP world is done after the fact. Now you have visibility to real-time status of invoices. So you can actually look at what coding has been applied and what dollar value is associated with a particular GL budget in real time so that you can make better decisions. You can also have visibility to the accruals that need to be booked and be able to automate that process and generate those reports proactively versus determining at month end that someone's got to spend a couple of hours extra to go chase down that information. And then obviously with fraud protection, eliminating those potential issues that arise when something out of the ordinary or nefarious is happening. You don't have to go back and recreate the wheel to figure out what happened. We're going to provide fraud protection, and you're going to have the internal controls to eliminate fraud before it happens. So these are all kind of things that are the results of automation that we hear from our customers, and that really are putting the entire puzzle together to give you a fully automated solution. So thank you folks for joining us today and your time and attention, and we'll look forward to communicating with you going forward as you begin your automation journey.
Great. Thank you so much, Jack and Rhonda. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. Thank you.